Welcome to Accelerate OC, the only show focused on the people leading innovation in Orange County. Join our host, Kerry Ransom, in his conversations with the trendsetters, entrepreneurs, investors, and leaders here, because it's time to Accelerate OC.
Good morning. Welcome to Accelerate OC. I'm Kerry Ransom, and along with my support, Paul, our engineer, I am super excited to welcome my friend Ray Grainger to the show today. Before I get Ray to share his amazing story with us, let me tell you a little bit about Ray. He is the founder and CEO of a company here called Maven Lincoln, and it's a fast-growing software company in what I'll call, and Ray will probably correct me, but I'll call it the services, business management, and collaboration space. It's a huge market that Ray and Maven Lincoln are really leading the way in and have almost created this new category. So we'll talk about that. Ray is very well educated. He came out of Harvey Mudd College, the very distinguished institution. He's also been a trustee there for a number of years. Before Maven Lincoln, he was a managing partner at Accenture, a global consulting firm that many people know, and he was a partner there for nearly 20 years. And a lot of the kernels of ideas, as Ray's shared with me over the years, came out of his experience at Accenture. So I think there's a great story to be told there in how the experience that you have in your current job can really help be the seed of idea for an entrepreneurial venture. And we'll talk a little bit about that today. Ray started Maven Lincoln 10 years ago, and over the last 10 years, they've had an amazing run in building it here in Orange County. And of course, that's why he's joining us on Accelerate OC today. I've had the pleasure of knowing him nearly the entire run of these 10 years and have always been so impressed by his leadership and his energy and his support of the Orange County tech community. It's easy to just put your head down and focus on building your company, but Ray has been willing and always available to encourage and support others and participate in the community. He's built an amazing team. I know a lot of the folks over at Maven Lincoln. He's built an amazing company, and I'm excited to talk to him and talk about it. Ray, it's so great to have you here today.
Good morning, Kerry. It's my pleasure.
So let's get to the starting line here at Accelerate OC. I'm going to turn it over to you. Tell us the founding story of how Maven Lincoln came to start.
Sure. Well, you indicated that a lot of the kernels of the idea came from my participation at Accenture. Accenture is a large global professional services firm, and in my practice, I served a lot of the software companies in Silicon Valley. A lot of software companies also have services divisions that implement their products out in the marketplace. And I was frequently asked to help those services divisions become higher performers as part of my consulting practice, and it typically involved implementing technology as well. And we ended up custom building a lot of the technology. Our perspective or point of view on the range of technology that needed to properly support and automate certain processes in the services business was broader than what the marketplace was offering. Additionally, what we noticed was that projects were getting shorter in duration. You know, these long 3-year SAP implementations where you just park a bunch of people on clients, that was kind of diminishing and going away. Projects were getting shorter. And the real problem to be solved was more of a human services supply chain problem, where most of the technology vendors in the past were addressing financial management only. This was really a people management and deployment and staffing challenge. And so we approached it from a services supply chain point of view, and I think that was the unique approach that we took to solving the problems. Yeah, so those were the kernels. Interestingly enough, I decided with my two co-founders. I had left Accenture knowing that I wanted to go do this business, joined a small company called Inquira that I and a couple of my partners had invested in through Accenture. And so had a little bit of understanding of what it means to make venture capital investments and from that side of the business, but hadn't been an operator in one of these companies before. And so left the firm to join a company called Inquira. It's now Oracle Knowledge. It was acquired by Oracle several years ago. And that's where I really learned the operational side of running a software company. So I practiced first.
That's a great point that I think a lot of people don't appreciate. So that, I mean, maybe that was a little bit the engineering training or something in a very deliberate step to do that first, and I'm sure that served you well.
It did. I knew that starting this kind of a company was going to require a lot of capital, and the first capital in was going to be mine. And I wanted to make the best use of it and deploy it in a way where I was being thoughtful and had some idea of what I was doing. And so I went to Inquira to learn a bit more about that. We had raised a couple of rounds while I was there, and so saw how you might more effectively deploy capital post-raise. And so knew a little bit more, and then left at the beginning of 2009 to found Maven Link with two of my partners from Inquira. And as you recall, around January 2009 was a really tough time from a global recession.
That's right.
But we bit the bullet, and as it turns out, it was a really good time to found the company. I had sold some of my founder stock from Accenture and had all of our seed capital in cash when the recession hit. And so that was just sort of luck. Of good timing. So we had a good amount of capital, seed capital, to get the business going. But I knew it would take, at least I believed it would take probably about $100 million to go grow the kind of company that we were planning. My partners had asked me how much they thought it was going to take, and that's what I told them. If they really believed me, they wouldn't have joined. They'd never quit their company. And so, really, it's going to cost $100 million in this recession?
Exactly.
Break, right?
Yeah, that seemed insurmountable, I'm sure, at the time.
Right. So that was the kind of the genesis, and we all believed in the idea. They believed that I had the acumen and domain expertise to shepherd the technology in the right way, and we had some seed capital to get this thing going.
So you've told me before that the other co-founders were significantly younger than you, and that you were deliberate in that decision. Share with the audience how that experience of having some different, almost generations, really gave you a unique perspective.
Yeah, I think that's been one of the key success factors of this company. Number one is, kind of what's the ideal number of co-founders that you might consider. One's often considered too few, right? You just don't have enough resources or breadth of skills, and you're wearing so many hats to begin with. And so kind of the research had shown like 3 is kind of the right number. And in our case, I was the principal domain expert and salesperson, really. And we had Sean Crafts, who came out of Berkeley Law during the dot-com boom, and just went straight into the startup world. Right? So he had a decade or so of startup experience, and he was being an attorney. He was also a deal guy, really good, on-the-fly deal shaper guy, and brilliant. And then Roger Neal, our technical co-founder, who's up in Silicon Valley. So complementary skills all the way around. And then we're also separated by a decade each in age. And I think that that's contributed to the endurance of this partnership that we've had in growing this company, that our personal lives don't overlap. Right? It's when we come together, it's about business, and then when we separate at the end of the day, our lives are completely separate. Right? And I think that has served us well in terms of operating together, but it's also added to a perspective on the business, a decade, or two apart. And I think in the right roles, having the right age group, right, has served us well too. So that's just, I think, one of those things I thought about early that it would be beneficial. It's played out that way.
It's amazing. And I think amazing too that 10 years later, all 3 founders are still there. I can't think of another startup that I know so well where that is the case at the 10-year mark because of life circumstances or founder relationship issue, whatever it may be. That's surprising and certainly a testament to your leadership.
Well, we've had our fair share of squabbles, let's say, right, and disagreements. And I went into it operating the company with the same principles that we had at Accenture. Accenture was a partnership at the time, and I liked that construct. And so, though I was the chief executive, we were really partners in the way that we operated, and everybody had a pretty strong voice in executing our strategy.
Well, that's a really compelling, even just choice of language of partners, co-founders. I think, generally speaking, they're all going to come at the business from that point of view, but it's not always the case that the CEO believes everybody remains a partner. And so I think, again, keeping that perspective, 10 years in, that's incredible. And certainly I know sets the culture tone for all of Maven Link.
It does. They're both fixtures in the company. And I think that it's important that people see other founders in a pretty strong way in the company, other than just me.
Sure.
Right. And so I think that's the case. And each year we do something we call the Founders Award. It's a really nice award, $5,000 stock options, and we dress up in tuxedos. It's kind of a big event in the company, and so we continue to just be out there in front of our employee base.
That's great. Well, let's get under the hood a little bit more here with Maven Link and with you. I know you've shared with me that this entrepreneurial journey's really transformed you. Talk a little bit about sort of the transformation personally that you've had through this journey so far.
Oh boy. Having been a partner for nearly 20 years at Accenture and working with some of the greatest companies in the world, and being a senior executive in the company, I kind of thought I knew a lot, or kind of knew it all. I was at the pinnacle of my leadership skills and that kind of thing. And I've sort of had to rebuild everything. I've leveraged that foundational knowledge that I had, but everything came at me really new in this journey. Though I had been part of making venture capital investments, it's different when you're going out and seeking venture capital, and the number of people and the rejection and trying to persuade people, and just looking for that, one group that's going to believe in what you're doing, right? I think the big learning through all of this, so everything was a new skill. Growing a SaaS company, the architecture, the partners that you might, finding a market, all of that was brand new, frankly. And a lot of it was making some educated guesses and some bets. But it really, after 10 years, I mean, this is a game of endurance. It really is. It's all about having the tenacity and endurance to get through the rejection. It's sort of like the next month is going to be better. That's really this, and what I see with most of the successes that I've been aware of, right, or close to, it really is just making sure that you've got enough dry powder somewhere, right, that you can just sustain the business and get it to the next stage, right, and just endure until you break through.
Did you have any of those moments along the way where you said, maybe I'm not an entrepreneur?
If I did, I would have, pressed the erase button on that idea really fast, right, because self-doubt, and it creeps in every once in a while, right? You got to just find a way to push it back or compartmentalize it and just get it out of the way, because you have to believe in yourself, right? Because there are others that just don't.
That's right.
And so you have to, first and foremost, I think, believe in yourself. And I've always thought that, just with my engineering background and just being a professional problem solver, that there's just always a solution to things. Always. And there's always somebody out there who's willing to help you. You just got to go find them.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
And that's why this is a game of endurance. If you just last long enough, you're going to find people that believe in what you're doing are going to help you out.
That's awesome. So any stories that come back to you from those early days? It's been 10 years. That for a lot of people, that's a really long run, especially in today's career turnover that you see in jobs and careers. Any of those early stories that come back to you, either to just remind you of this is why we're doing it from those early days, or that just hit you from time to time?
Well, because we started the company at the time we did in early January of 2009, we had to get extremely cost conscious. The money was ours, and subsequently from friends and family through a convertible note that we had raised about $1 million. So we had their money to steward as well. And we were very frugal with money. When we raised our first large round of capital, the motivation or the direction was to scale quickly. And I wasn't used to spending money like that, right? That was a mistake, right? That was a mistake. We've learned from that one, and now we're back to our original roots a little bit about being much more fiscally conservative, understanding really how a business ought to scale more predictably, let's say, right? And just getting really fiscally disciplined at this stage of the business, right? And that would be the guidance I'd give anybody else once they raise their first significant. This was about a $40 million round when we raised our first significant round. Is be thoughtful about the deployment of that capital and how fast you're really going to scale the business.
Well, and I've seen where it can become even a little bit of a frenzy.
Yes.
Where if one department looks like they're really investing a lot of money, another one almost feels compelled to do it. And I've seen it with hiring. I've seen it with spending, all those. So I think that's a great point. And you don't want to be penny wise, pound foolish, but you want to your point, be responsible and deliberate.
Yeah, you got to know the levers of your business,
That's right.
how they're measured, and quickly make adjustments. After our first significant round of capital, that was a Goldman Sachs investment. It was, we thought we had it. We thought we had the product market fit, and even our up markets that we really had like 2 clients in, right?
Sure.
And we thought it was time to go and press the pedal down. And every 2 weeks we'd have board calls just talking about, are we on hiring plan? I mean, we were hiring 150 people as fast as we could. I would recommend against that and be more thoughtful, deliberate, and so we're back to really looking at healthy growth, not crazy growth.
Sure.
At our stage, around a 40% growth is a really good growth rate.
That's amazing.
And driving a cash flow break even business and just being fiscally thoughtful.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's easy to get pulled into the allure of Silicon Valley approach, and you'll read blitz scaling or one of these that growth at all costs, and I think that's a great cautionary tale for folks to consider different, and each business is different in whether it's the sales cycle or the maturity of the market or whatever it may be. It is a key part to understand to really figure out what is the right way to grow in your market. If it's a land grab and there's a competitive landscape and somebody's going to win, it may be a totally different approach. But I think you give some great advice to others out there that there's not just one way to go about it.
Well, the thing to be aware of too is the investor mindset is fickle and it changes, right? You're going to raise capital maybe every couple of years. And at one point, it's going to be grow at all costs, and that's where the value is derived. And then it changes to where it's grow at the right unit economics of the business, and so they're going to look more at that and ratchet down the growth rate a little bit and focus more on the economics of that growth.
That's right. So this whole show is about accelerating innovation and activity here in Orange County, and I'm committed to trying to build more of that connectivity across our community here. As you think back to the early days of Maven Link, and with the countless new startups that are emerging here in Orange County today, what things could the community have done to make things easier for Maven Link in those early days?
Well, 10 years in, we feel much more connected to the community than we did in the very beginning. Before I started Maven Link, I spent a lot of time up in Silicon Valley, a decade or more, and I had very little in the way of a business network here in the community. My co-founder, Sean, had much more. He grew up here, and he had a pretty good connectivity into the community. And he first connected us with Octane, and that's where you and I had a chance to first meet many years ago. And I think that was the first time I started getting connected into the community. So Octane was the gateway, really, for our company for that, in terms of advisors and other people who could connect us to, venture capital, get venture capital meetings, or, people who could be brought in and test our go-to-market approach and those kinds. So that was a real kind of the first entree into that. So, and I know Octane's, we participated in different capacities with Octane, so that's been a good vehicle.
And you guys went through the Launchpad program there.
We did. We were one of the early Launchpad, and realized that had we not done something like that, we would have been much less prepared to go out and raise institutional money, right? From that, it really shaped us. So we didn't really know what we were doing, frankly, and it really shaped us up on how to really get the business presented in a way that made sense for investors. So we did that. Other things that we're much more dialed into, but they just sort of came to our help. Was Irvine Company. That's a unique asset, really, to tap into here, right? A company with that broad of a real estate portfolio to allow the flexibility for entrepreneurs to have a very small space to start, but a presentable space and grow a team, and not worry about breaking leases, and the costs of doing so, and so being reluctant and holding your business back. Irvine Company's been a fantastic landlord. We've been with them for 5+ years or so, and 4 spaces. Right?
And they've been getting, I think, even increasingly more flexible and more strategic in working with folks too.
They have.
That's great.
The reputation is that they own the whole county, and therefore it might be tough from a pricing perspective. We've not found that. We've found they've been very flexible. They've got spaces that are appropriate for startups. Some quite what might be considered quite small, but just perfect for a small startup. And then growing, we now have got 60,000 feet with the Irvine Company, and a really great deal. So Irvine Company's been great. The other great partner that we tapped into is Silicon Valley Bank. We've been with Silicon Valley Bank for about 4 years with different types of loan vehicles, term loans, line of credit on our recurring revenue, flexibility when things aren't going the way you planned, right? And being able to work with us to get through some rough spots and tune things up. So Silicon Valley Bank's been a good partner. And then Carrot Capital partners as well, right? They're headquartered here as well as San Francisco. And so we were able to tap into them locally. They're our largest investor. Carrot has north of or nearly $50 million in the business. And so a local private equity group, right, came to our aid as well, right, to help the business.
That's right. Were there any things that you sort of scratched your head early on and said, why isn't this here? Or it appeared too hard to locate versus maybe your time spent in Silicon Valley? Yeah,
the one thing that when you're in Silicon Valley, right, this has been an institution there for 50+ years, and we didn't have that when we. So I was not surprised by it, but wished it had the same feel where you could go to any meeting, just every interaction, whether you're at Phil's Coffee, but it's nice to see Phil's Coffee is now here, and Blue Bottle, and SAP down here.
That's
right.
That's
Everybody's making their way down here, but that was lacking here at the time, right? But I think that there's much more. I mean, the things that you're doing, Octane's doing, to bringing those are the gateways, right, to bring the community together, because there are very few other ways that entrepreneurs come together here. But through events, meetings, people have a chance to get to know one another in the community. That was lacking 10 years ago, and it's much more prevalent now. And as I mentioned, right, you've got leading private equity firms making investments here. We took a round from Goldman Sachs a few years ago. And I think just in our last round, we talked with many private equity investors who are keen on investing in Orange County, right? They're not that they're tired of Silicon Valley, but they recognize that there's a lot of talent and great entrepreneurs in Orange County. Right. And so we've seen significant investment making its way here.
That's right. Well, and it's great to see. I mean, folks like you and I had Kyle Camrus on a few weeks ago, has Cloud Verga on a rocket ship, and several others of some folks that'll be on in the coming weeks who have built great companies here. And I think that will be the reinforcement to the capital markets, and hopefully to as there's some liquidity achieved. We saw Silence get acquired earlier this year, and CrowdStrike go public, and we're seeing some of that that will hopefully lead to the reinvestment and budding new entrepreneurs out there. So that it seems like we're on the right path.
We are. We had Instamed, which is their technical headquarters is here in Newport Beach, and one of their co-founders here. They just had a really nice exit to JP Morgan right a couple of months ago.
Yeah. So there's some great stories like that we want to keep telling. To, as we talked about before we started, the big part of this is about letting people know in the community here that the resources, like several you shared, they're here. The entrepreneurs are here. The support network is here, and people just need to step out and show themselves so that we can be there to help them. And in some cases, it's coaching them. This idea isn't fundable for whatever reason, or it's not big enough yet. But all types, and I think that's really what we want to create here in Orange County, is a place where anybody can be an entrepreneur, and we want to help them succeed.
Perfect.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about a couple more things. We're about out of time. Paul's given me the high sign. What can the community do today? I mean, Maven Link is on a continued growth trajectory. People here want to help companies like Maven Link be as great as they can be. What can the community do to help you today?
Well, we recently just took a significant round of funding. We hope that to be our last round prior to a public offering or some outcome of the business. And that gives us an opportunity to accelerate our strategy and hire some really new additions to our executive team. So for those folks that are listening, we're hiring marketing, sales, product. Are some key roles, right? Also a CFO, right? So folks who are able to take a business to the next stage that we aspire to. So that would be one thing, right? That those folks that are out there and trying to place people in what they think are exciting companies, we're open for business.
Okay,
Yeah.
That's great. So final lap. One of the things I'd like to ask all of my guests here on Accelerate OC is to share either a lesson that they've learned or some kind of tip with the audience who are largely people who really are thinking about building a company here in Orange County. So any lessons you've learned that you haven't shared or tips that you'd have for folks here?
I'll go back and I'll just reference this book I
Yeah,
shared
I
with
mean,
you.
first
Carrie.
guest ever to bribe me with a
There
book.
you go.
So I'm greatly appreciative
Yeah,
of
it's
this.
we did talk about this. Early on in my career, I spent a couple of years in Antarctica, and so my entrepreneurial hero was Ernest Shackleton, or is Ernest Shackleton, and his family motto was "By endurance we conquer," and that is something that I've adopted as well. I alluded to that earlier. That in an entrepreneurial venture, you're going to come up against every obstacle you've never imagined, and you have to be able to reset goals, get through it, shift your strategy, find something that works, anchor on that, and it really is an endurance game. And so, by endurance we conquer.
That's a great quote. I will definitely attribute that one to you through the Shackleton family. Ray, thank you so much for taking us on this ride today, for leading by example in the community here, and being available. You've done so much, and you're definitely doing your part to accelerate OC.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Carrie.
You've just listened to Accelerate OC. Join our live recordings every Tuesday morning at accelerateoc.com, or listen, like, and share anytime from your favorite podcast spot. Let's accelerate OC together.